Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. The NBA is still in the midst of the second round of the playoffs, but teams have made sure that they are going in some sort of direction for their future. These eliminated teams, I should say. And there are a lot of coaching positions open in the NBA right now. Sap and I are going to use this opportunity to rank those jobs by desirability, I guess, and give our predictions as to who will, in fact, be taking over the reins of those teams. As it stands today, Sap, the openings on teams are as follows: the Celtics, the Pacers, the Blazers, the Mavericks, the Magic, the Wizards, and the Pelicans. Could there be some more openings? Potentially the Bucks, should they lose in their series. Everybody seems to think that Mike Budenholzer would be out of a job. And you can never discount, a surprise firing too. I mean, I don't think Doc Rivers will get fired in Philadelphia after 1 year, but who the hell knows? It's the NBA. Weird stuff happens. I'm not going to make any sort of prediction. You think also, Sap, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a possibility that your guy in LA, Frank Vogel, gets canned?
No, I think he's safe. I mean, they had the injury concerns this year, and LeBron seems to like Frank Vogel. So if that's the case, I think Frank Vogel should buy rather than rent at this point in Southern California. I think he's a good coach. I preferred Monty Williams at the time, and Monty Williams, I thought, did the best job of any coach in the league this year with Phoenix. But I think Frank Vogel's okay in LA. I also think that Ty Lue's safe with the Clippers. If they're able to advance, he'll go one round further than Doc Rivers did last year, and he's doing it in the final few stages of the second round without Kawhi Leonard. And I know that Steve Ballmer is a very volatile leader, to say the least. I mean, you can see him on the sideline. The poor guy looks like should never use that term, poor guy, when I'm describing Steve Ballmer, who's worth about $80 billion. But he looks very stressed out. And he's a guy who's never really lost at anything. But I think Ty Lue's safe. Ty Lue's done a really good job with the Clippers this year. So I think the 7 vacancies are what we're looking at. But again, if Milwaukee doesn't get to at least the conference finals, maybe even the finals, then I think they may make a change with Mike Budenholzer, being shown the door in Milwaukee.
So let's take the Bucks out of the equation because we just don't know what's going to happen right now. I'm going to leave them just off the board. I think obviously it would be a great vacancy because you have, the 2-time MVP and Giannis on the team. And so it's obviously attractive, but for the purposes of this exercise, Sap, let's just say that we're going to keep it off the board. So that leaves us with 7 total vacancies, Sap. Do you want to do this in descending order?
No, let's do it in ascending order.
Okay, so you want to start with the top vacancy in your mind. To me, and I think you're going to agree with me on this one, it's Dallas.
Sure. Yeah,
because Luka Doncic is probably going to be the best player in the NBA in short order, in my opinion. I think he's already a top 5 player. And when you have a guy who pretty clearly can be the best player on a championship team on your roster, despite the fact the rest of the roster is pretty much dog crap, that's a really good place to start. And anybody would want to coach this guy. He is young. He's getting better every year. You have an owner who has deep pockets and is willing to spend, even though the team seems like it's in a little bit of disarray right now. That can be fixed with the right head coach. So I have Dallas as the top job amongst these 7 teams right now, Sap.
Yeah, because if you look at the best player or top 2 players from each team, Luka's the best of the bunch, right? I mean, New Orleans has Zion, Boston has Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Portland has Dame Lillard. But because Luka's so young, in fact, he's the second youngest of all those great players I just mentioned. He's a little older than Zion. Dallas is such an appealing place. Again, I'm a huge fan of Mark Cuban. He'll spend to bring players. He'll make moves to bring players there. They relieved Donnie Nelson of his duties as general manager. He'd been there 20 years. That seemed to irritate Luka Doncic. But then just the other day, they decided to move. Well, Rick Carlisle resigned, which I guess
got fired,
and they just painted it that way. And then he'll get his final 2 years of salary, because you generally don't resign when you still got, $6-7 million a year left for 2 more years. Generally coaches aren't going to leave $12 to $14 million on the table. So, yeah, they moved on from Donnie Nelson, who Luka liked, and they moved on from Rick Carlisle, who apparently he didn't like. And Carlisle's kind of a hard-ass, old-school guy. So, we remember how much he clashed with Rajon Rondo when Rondo spent a very short time in Dallas. So Carlisle is looking for a job, or maybe he's just going to take a year off, reset, and come back next year when there's more opportunities. But Dallas is the best position because of Luka Doncic. And I think they're going to go outside the box. I'm going to go with Becky Hammon, currently the assistant coach at the San Antonio Spurs. I think Mark Cuban is the type of owner that is not afraid to do things differently and break ground with a move like this. So I'm going to say Becky Hammon becomes the next coach of the Dallas Mavericks.
I have it as Jason Kidd. He played for Dallas a couple of times in his career, started his career and ended his career with the Dallas Mavericks. A nice little bookend for Jason Kidd. I do not think he's a very good coach. He is extremely popular with players. Go figure that one out. I always thought he was kind of a dick, but players do seem to like him. I know Giannis was very tight with him. So he seems like a player's coach. Obviously, you want somebody that Luka is going to want, and a player's coach seems to fill that need. Maybe he'll be less of a hard ass than Rick Carlisle. I like the Dallas connection. I know he's close with Mark Cuban. For whatever reason, again, he's failed in both his head coaching stops in the NBA. He still seems to be an in-demand name. And so I do think there's also a reason why he took his name out of the running for that Portland job. Dallas is a better job. So maybe he had some sort of sense that was on the horizon for him. So I think Jason Kidd will get that job.
That's a good choice. And again, with Luka Doncic, perhaps you want to bring in a player with the cachet of Jason Kidd as a player. Maybe Jason Kidd can come out of retirement at, 45 years old and lace up the sneakers and be the backup point guard or handle the ball a little bit when Luka needs to go to the bench. But I'm sure Luka respects the hell out of Jason Kidd. He was a role player on Dallas's only championship team. We hear that Dirk Nowitzki is going to be involved as a consultant with the Mavericks, hiring the next president of basketball operations and head coach. He's going to have some say in that. So I'm sure he respects the hell out of Jason Kidd, who helped him win a championship. So I kind of like your pick there, Jed. I'm just thinking of someone's going to hire Becky Hammon, and I think that Mark Cuban seems to be such an independent owner that he might do that. But Jason Kidd would be an interesting pick, and if it makes Luka happy, that's all Mark Cuban's concerned with.
So let's go to the second best job, Sap. Despite myself, I still think it's the Celtics, even though I don't think they're in good shape because of the history of the team. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, those are pretty good building blocks, even though the rest of the roster is pretty much crap, similar to Dallas. So you do have two young star players there. I know a lot of people in the league think Jason Tatum can elevate himself to be in the top 10 conversation. Perhaps he can. He's certainly already one of the best scorers in the league. So I think that's a good position. And you have, again, a rabid fan base, a city that historically hasn't been great at attracting free agents, but recently has been better at it. And so there is some potential mechanism to even get a little bit better. And even though it hasn't gone well the last year, it's not a complete, cluster F as like some of the other teams are. And you're playing in a major market and coaching for a legacy franchise. So I have the Celtics as the second best job.
And you have an owner who's very patient, right? I mean, Brad Stevens spent 8 years as head coach. We know Doc was here for a decade, right? I mean, they're very patient with head coaches. Danny Ainge was in charge for 17 years. So Wick Grossbeck tends to be very patient. Maybe he's losing patience as he gets older and frustrated and wants to win another championship. I think Boston is the third best spot. The thing is, I think the fact that the Celtic fans seem to really always look at things in a positive light is probably a decent thing. They don't generally criticize the coach all that much. I mean, there's certain factions of the media, certain factions of the fan base that will criticize Brad Stevens and Doc Rivers. We saw that. You do, but a lot of people don't. They give carte blanche to Brad Stevens, and they did to Doc Rivers. Not at all. The only thing is it an appealing job when you have the former coach now being your boss? So
Yeah,
Brad
I just don't
Stevens,
think
I don't
that's
know how
going to
long
last very long.
I don't think it's
That's
going
the
to last
thing.
that long either, because I've got Brad Stevens going to one of these places
Oh,
actually
okay.
sooner than later. So I think Boston is the third best spot. I think Sam Cassell will be the next coach of the Boston Celtics. I'm very confident in that. He played here. He understands the culture. The Celtics love bringing people in or bringing people back to the organization that have some sort of ties. I mean, Chauncey Billups was here for about 3 months before Rick Pitino decided to trade him. So I think Sam Cassell is going to be the next head coach of the Celtics. I put New Orleans above Boston only because of Zion. Their number 2 guy, Brandon Ingram. I mean, we had this discussion during the season. Would you take Zion and Brandon Ingram over Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? It seemed to be pretty close. I would say New Orleans' third best player. Lonzo Ball's better than the Celtics' third best player. The only problem with New Orleans is the same people that own the New Orleans Pelicans own the New Orleans Saints, and it seems like they spend 95% of the time focusing on the Saints. It's almost like the Pelicans are an afterthought. So how good of an organization is that? But you do get a chance to coach Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, some really talented young players. So I'd put New Orleans just above Boston, but I'm not going to push back that much because Boston is a great job when you consider Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and being a legacy franchise, I think is a pretty cool option for especially older coaches who get the whole Celtic mystique. Now, I'm hoping that the Celtics go with more of a younger middle-aged coach like Sam Cassell rather than a retread like Stan Van Gundy or someone like Rick Carlisle. I don't want to see those guys here. I want to see a former player who's more in tune with the young players. So that's why I go with Sam Cassell. New Orleans I have as the second best option, and I think that Chauncey Billups would make a lot of sense there. I'm so high on Chauncey Billups that I think he could fit the role of pretty much any franchise, but I have him going to New Orleans as their next head coach because I think that Zion Williamson would certainly respect Chauncey Billups.
So I just flip-flopped it with you. I have New Orleans as the third best job for this. Just to finish things off with the Celtics, I have Ime Udoka as their next head coach. I was reading an article today that said him, Chauncey Billups, and Darvin Ham are the front runners for the job. Udoka is from the Spurs coaching tree. He coached Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and Jaylen Brown along with Greg Popovich in these Olympics qualifiers or whatever the hell there was, some basketball tournament. And apparently the players really like him. And I think that that's going to play a major factor in who the Celtics hires, who Tatum and Brown like. We know Brad Stevens, who seemingly is making this decision, has a very close relationship with Greg Popovich. We know Ime Udoka has Greg Popovich's endorsement from that Spurs coaching tree. Udoka wasn't a star player, but he was in the league for a while. So I think that that's who's going to end up with the job based off of he has some sort of prior relationship with Tatum and Brown. And I think he'll probably be a good coach. I would personally prefer Billups or Cassell because I think they have a little more cachet as players than Udoka did. But if they like his coaching style and they think he's a good player, listen, at least he was in the league for longer than a season. He has some cachet. Right. I think he won a championship with the Spurs. So that's who I think is going to ultimately get the job. As far as New Orleans, who I had as my third best opening, Sap, just again flip-flopping it with you there. The reason I have it a little bit below the Celtics is because of the market. As you mentioned, the owners don't really seem to care about it. They may potentially move. Zion already doesn't seem particularly thrilled with it there. The fans, I don't think, are particularly invested with the team. They can't really recruit free agents there. So I don't think it's a great basketball market. I don't know, how big of a pain in the ass this Zion thing is going to end up being. My guess is it'll probably blow over. But I just, because I think it's just not a good market and they might move, which always creates turmoil within the team when you have to move cities. I just put it a little bit below the Celtics. And, the Celtics, even though the season was a disaster, Tatum and Brown deserve credit. They've made the playoffs every year of their careers. And Zion is yet to make the playoffs. So his ceiling seems limitless, but he hasn't yet put it together. So I'll go with the established guys who have at least done something in the NBA. Zion is yet to do anything other than, make one all-star team in his career so far. So I put it just at 3. I think Jacques Vaughn is going to get the job. He's a Nets assistant coach. He did a pretty good job when he was the head coach for the Nets. I know he's interviewing for this job, former player, which I think is key for New Orleans, again, to hire a former player who's not going to be basically just try to find the opposite of Stan Van Gundy is basically what they should do. So Jacques Vaughn, I think the name will play really well in New Orleans. Jacques, perfect for
Sure.
the
Yeah,
French
in the French Quarter.
French speaking people in New Orleans, and
Yeah.
so that's who I have going to the Pelicans. Saps. So we've done our 1, 2, and 3. We both agree on Dallas being the best job. I have Boston as 2. You have New Orleans. I have New Orleans as 3. You have Boston as 3. So that leads us to the 4th best opening on our list of 7 teams. I have that as the Portland Trailblazers, Sap, and I have Chauncey Billups, who seems to be the front runner for this job for a month now, taking over the job in Portland and being saddled with coaching a very limited roster and a one really, really superstar level player.
We're probably going to agree on 4, 5, 6, and 7 in that order, right? I mean,
possible.
These do seem to be pretty cut and dried. I agree with you on Portland being the 4th best option. Great fan base. Kind of a stay out of the way owner, although we both feel that at some point Paul Allen's sister is going to probably sell the team, and maybe in 5, 6 years it could be sold to LeBron James. That makes the most sense. You brought that up about a month ago, and that's a fantastic prediction because the connection with Nike, Beaverton to Portland's fairly close. LeBron could still live on the West Coast and be the owner of the Portland Trailblazers, or at least the majority owner of the Portland Trailblazers. That makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go completely crazy here, and I think Chauncey Billups should make a good choice anywhere. I'm a huge Chauncey Billups fan. In fact, only a couple of years ago, the Cavaliers were very interested in hiring him as president of basketball operations. He's one of those guys I look at and say could do anything in basketball. I mean, heck, I think Chauncey Billups could be a future commissioner of the league. That's how high I hold him. He was such a great player, a winner, a leader, smart guy. I think wherever he goes, he's going to be successful. Portland, which played no defense the last several years and was pretty effective and efficient on offense, why not go completely over the top with even more offense and offer the position to Mike D'Antoni, who somehow gets hired all over the place? I mean, this would be, I believe, his 5th or 6th stop in the NBA. Dame Lillard would lead the league in scoring if Mike D'Antoni was the head coach, right? I mean, that seems to be a given because he finished 3rd this year. Put D'Antoni as his head coach, Lord knows what would happen there. So I'm going to go with Mike D'Antoni. If anything, the Trailblazers would be very entertaining with Dame Lillard and him as the coach. And
he's an excellent regular season head coach.
Yeah, and a great offensive coach. Then you get to the postseason, you lose. But Portland has lost in the first round 4 out of the last 5 years. So just be relevant and exciting.
Yeah, the only team that D'Antoni struggled to do anything with was the Knicks, which kind of hard to blame him. Nobody really does. That's why Tom Thibodeau won Coach of the Year. I like that. I think it would work there. I think it would be exciting offense to watch. Again, it depends on what Portland wants to do. Do they want to blow things up and trade Dame Lillard, or do they want to try to build something while he's there? They, like you said, they don't play much defense, so maybe they just lean into that, and D'Antoni would be a good coach for them. For that, I could totally see that. I think he's certainly a desirable head coach because, like you said, he racks up wins in the regular season. I mean, his teams are perennially high seeded. They just falter in the playoffs all the time. So, yeah, I could see that happening. I like it there. Let's go to our number 5 job and see if we agree with this one. I have it as the Washington Wizards, Sap. And I have them hiring Becky Hammon as their head coach. I think they're going to be the ones to do it. They're also, they're playing a major market in Washington, D.C., but they never really talked about it. I think this would put them sort of on the map in terms of being trailblazers in the nation's capital, which is, always a good story. They do have 2 star players, regardless of what you think of them. Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal are both star players. So I think that's a decent building block. And they do have a couple of nice young players, Ryu Hachimura, Denny Avija. So I think it's a pretty decent place. I like the roster. I've always liked the roster. I think they underachieved a little bit this year. But with the young players, plus the 2 star players, I think it's a pretty good place and in a good-sized market. And Becky Hammon, I think, is deserving of a head coaching job. And I think that this is the team that'll do it.
I'm surprised we had a difference here because I have Indiana at number 5, Washington at number 6. Um, I think Kevin Ollie could be an option in Washington. I still don't understand why Kevin Ollie isn't coaching in this league. He was fantastic at Connecticut. A guy who played for 12, 15 years in the league, was respected by players. He was a player, the veteran player on Oklahoma City when they had Durant, Harden, and Westbrook. All three of those guys loved Kevin Ollie. I thought Kevin Ollie was going to be in play maybe to be the Nets head coach.
Yeah, no one even talks about him. It's weird.
It's almost as if, is there something, has he got skeletons in the closet?
Yeah, he's like the Colin Kaepernick of coaching.
Yeah, like I think this guy would be a fantastic coach. And I know he's close with Westbrook. Now, I don't know if you want to bring in a coach just because of Russell Westbrook, because I could see Washington trying to trade Westbrook in another year, or maybe even this offseason because of the contract. And Westbrook is turning into Bobby Bonds, not Barry Bonds, or Ricky Henderson, who were still good enough that teams wanted them, but not great enough at the end of their career where people had to hold on to them. Like Barry's father, Bobby, was a great player, and like every year he got traded. Ricky Henderson, of course, late in his career, seemed to play with every different team in Major League Baseball. So Westbrook, I think, is going to be one of those guys that ends up playing with like 3 more teams over the next 5 years. So that when you look at his statistics throughout his career, you're going to go, wow, I can't remember. I forgot that he played with so-and-so and so-and-so. Like, we're going to forget he played for Houston for 1 year, and now he's Washington for 1 year, and maybe he plays 1 more year in Washington and they move on. But I think Kevin Ollie would be a really good choice. I have Indiana above Washington. I think Indiana has a decent roster, and I think it's, a good fan base there. They've had some success, and that's why I have Brad Stevens going. Again, I still don't buy into him being president of basketball operations, although he did make this deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder, which surprised me. So obviously he's not going to be a do-nothing president of basketball operations. He's been on the job 2 or 3 weeks, and he's already made a pretty sizable move. I still think that at some point, if a team like the Indiana Pacers reach out to Wyc Grousbeck and say, we're interested in Brad Stevens coaching our team, can we make it happen? That Wyc would probably say sure, because now Wyc would get out of about a $40 million commitment that he still owes to Brad Stevens. So I got Brad Stevens going to Indiana and Kevin Ollie going to Washington.
Okay, I have Indiana actually as my dead last ranked team. So I'll go to my 6th ranked team, which is your last ranked team.
Yep.
The Orlando Magic. I have them hiring Kenny Atkinson, who was a very, very good coach for the Nets in a similar situation where they were rebuilding and trying to sort of rebuild a culture there. Atkinson kind of got fired without cause just because Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving didn't like the cut of his jib, I guess. And so
all you need to know.
Orlando, I don't think it's a great job, but here's what I like about it. I am intrigued by Markelle Fultz still, all these years later. I am intrigued by Jonathan Isaac all these years later. And they're going to have a good draft pick. I like that as the baseline for building something. I don't think Indiana has any mechanism to get better or get much worse than where they are right now. They're in the NBA no man's land that I do not want to be in at all. I like Sabonis. I like Turner, though it seems like every year Turner's on the trade block. I like Malcolm Brogdon a lot. But I don't think that they're going to be competing for a championship anytime soon or bad enough to get a transformational player anytime soon. Orlando could, should they win the lottery, maybe get that this year. I don't think they'll be particularly good next year. So maybe they get it next year. And they do have some young guys who have potential. So I like the baseline that Orlando has sort of created there. Wendell Carter is a guy that they also got for Vucevic, young guy who's potential. Mo Bamba potentially could be something, maybe not. But I like that they have at least the opportunity to grow. Whereas I think Indiana is kind of set where they are for the foreseeable future. So I have Orlando with Kenny Atkinson as my second to last job, Sap.
Yeah, good choice. Who do you have Indiana hiring? And that's your last team.
Terry Stotts from Portland. I don't think he's going to be out of a job for long because I think he did a pretty good job in Portland. Similar sort of feel with the Pacers is that, okay, we're a pretty good team, but we're not going to be competing for a championship. I don't feel like Indiana feels like they have to hit, a home run with their coaching hire. Stotts is solid. I think they're happy with solid.
Yeah, he seems like he'd fit in Indiana, right? Like,
Yeah.
Brooks Brothers suit, buttoned up, that type of coach. That's like Indiana. That would be Brad Stevens also. I do have Stevens going to Indiana. I mean, look, maybe he's going to embrace this position of president of basketball operations. Maybe he's burnt out of coaching at this point and needs a year or two away to go in the front office and try to, recharge the batteries. I have Orlando last, and I'm going with Penny Hardaway as the head coach of the Orlando Magic. He's currently coaching in college at Memphis. He is an icon in Orlando. They need a big splash, and what a big splash it would be to hire Penny Hardaway as their head coach, and he can help Markelle Fultz learn the position of being a point guard. I think it would be a major move on the part of the Orlando Magic, who, when's the last time the Orlando Magic were even relevant? It's like a decade ago when
Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard was there, and they got to the finals in 2009, lost to the Lakers, and then they got to the conference finals and lost to the Celtics in 2010. Since then, they've been totally irrelevant. I think Penny Hardaway would give them a little juice.
I like that a lot, Sap. I think that's a great idea. His name has sort of been on the fringe of some of these rumors for coaching positions. Obviously, the Orlando connection is apparent, and he is, like you said, an icon, one of the greatest players in franchise history, perhaps the most popular player in franchise history.
You could make that case, yeah, because, I mean, Shaq left after, 4 years, and Penny Hardaway then had to deal with injuries. Penny Hardaway, I mean, man, I think people forget how popular he was in this league back 25 years ago.
A lot of people
he was
thought
a rising star.
He was the heir apparent to Michael Jordan when Jordan was going to retire.
Yeah, because, I mean, his game was more Magic Johnson than Michael Jordan's.
But he was like becoming a star in terms of the commercials. Remember Little Penny and the shoes and all that stuff?
Fantastic.
He had a fun game.
He did. And he and Shaq, it looked like that was going to be the next Magic Kareem. I know they always say Kobe, Shaq was Magic Kareem. Well, Kobe and Magic's games are nothing alike. Penny Hardaway's game was a lot like Magic's game. And, they did get to the NBA Finals in 1995, and they got swept by the Houston Rockets. But, I think it would be an interesting move. I think he's done a good job at Memphis. And when a guy goes back and coaches in college, he's serious about being a coach. Like, it's not
he had a tremendous high school coaching record. I think he was named the National High School Coach of the Year. And we know he can recruit, which is huge in the NBA and huge in Orlando. Yeah. I mean, I think he could lure a player that's better than what you would expect Orlando to get in free agency. I mean, he landed James Wiseman, who was the top recruit in the country, to come to freaking Memphis.
Yeah. No. I think he does a really good job with that. And I always embrace players like Juwan Howard, who got back into coaching, got into coaching. They're there because they take it seriously. Chauncey Billups could have done other things besides be an assistant coach with the Clippers or whatever the case may be. But he was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna learn how to be a coach and then eventually become a head coach. I mean, that's why it was kind of an odd hire with Steve Nash with the Brooklyn Nets, because when he got hired, he had no coaching experience. I think he was working on his golf or tennis game in Malibu, got a call and said, sure, I'll take $6-7 million a year to coach the most talented team in basketball. So is he really invested in being a coach where I think these other guys are?
Yeah. Sap, do you agree that should the Bucks job become available, that's the best job?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, because you already have the players in place, right? You've got Giannis, Middleton, Holiday. They built a nice culture there. And also, if you're a coach who has a lot of confidence in yourself, you probably look at Giannis and say, I can make him better. I can unlock some of the things that he can't do. Like, I think in the end, Luka's going to be a better player than Giannis. He's just got a wider range of skill.
Well-rounded, yeah.
Well-rounded, especially offensive. I mean, Giannis is a force defensively. Luka's not. I'm still concerned with Luka with his conditioning. I'm not crazy that he shows up in camp, 10, 12 pounds overweight, where Giannis is a workout warrior. So those types of things, I give the edge to Giannis. But I mean, Luka could be a top 15 player all time. I mean, I think he's that good, that talented. I don't know if Giannis can ever crack that because his game isn't as well-rounded. But yeah, that becomes a very, very intriguing job.
I wonder if any of these coaching candidates are waiting to see what happens there before they're committal.
Could be, yeah. That's a good point, Jed, because it's not like the NFL. Like the NFL, like you want to hire the coach right away. Like if your team didn't make the playoffs, you want to hire the coach by the middle of January. Sometimes you'll wait for the coordinator from the team in the AFC or NFC championship game or the teams that go to the Super Bowl and you wait a little bit longer. In basketball, you don't need a coach right now, right?
No.
I mean, if you're the Celtics, you can wait another month if you want to really get the right guy. So if you're a prospective coach, you can say, well, let me just hold on. We'll see what happens with Milwaukee, because that becomes a plum job.
Right. And in football,
really
you obviously point. The coach also needs to really scout the hell out of the draft too. In the NBA, it's,
and he's got to assemble a staff, and it's a lot bigger. I mean, it's a lot bigger because you're talking about a 53-man roster as opposed to a 12 to 15-man roster.
Right. So should that become available? We agree that it would be the top job.
Yeah,
I think
so.
that also Mike Budenholzer would get another job. I think he would be snatched up quickly. So one of these positions, somebody would be bumped out, and he would end up with one of these other teams.
Although a lot of these coaches, if they've got money owed to them, and again, it's never easy to just step aside for a year, but these guys get burnt out, right? I mean, Brad Stevens may have just reached the point of being burnt out, that he needs a year where he's not traveling with the team, that he's working a normal schedule, he's working in the office, he's doing some other things, rather than being totally invested as a head coach. That maybe a year away sometimes works well. It may for Rick Carlisle. If Budenholzer gets fired, it may work out for him, because when you're that talented a coach, and I think Budenholzer is an outstanding coach, there's no question about that. I think, had a bad series against the Brooklyn Nets. But, next year, when there's 6 or 7 more jobs available, his name will zoom right to the top.
Last thing I want to say, Sap, we also agree that I don't see how Atlanta is going to let Nate McMillan go, because he's technically the interim coach, so he's not under contract next year. I'm not considering this an opening, but I'm under the assumption that they'll do whatever it takes to bring him back.
My Lord. I mean, why isn't he the head coach right now instead of the interim head coach?
I think they think maybe it's lucky to leave him with the interim tag. They don't want to mess with it.
That's a good point, yeah. They're superstitious, right? We're not going to name you head coach till we're at the parade winning the NBA championship. Right. I mean, how would that be? What a story that would be, that somehow the Atlanta Hawks win the title for the first time since like 1958 when they were in St. Louis. And then they, at the parade, they go, okay, we're taking the interim tag off. And Nate McMillan's now our permanent head coach. Yeah, because if they don't rehire him, he jumps right to the forefront of any place. And you look at what Indiana did this year, and they didn't even make the playoffs, right? They lost in that play-in tournament. Right. It speaks highly of how good a coach Nate McMillan is. I mean, at least he got them to the postseason several times. I remember what was in 2018, they took LeBron and the Cavaliers to 7 games. That was a tough series. And even game 7 was close in Cleveland for a while. I mean, he did a good job. Excellent coach. I mean, he's also a guy that I think he commands a lot of respect. He's not a yeller. Right. I mean, Doc Rivers is turning into kind of the cranky old guy that's yelling a lot, which I think is a turnoff. Obviously, Stan Van Gundy takes it to another level. I think the younger players don't want to respond to screaming and yelling. They want somebody who's kind of fatherly and calm. And I think Nate McMillan
can't be
is
Brad
great
Stevens too, who's
no, that's
in
the
a coma.
other end of the spectrum, right? Yeah, who again, Brad Stevens to me would have been a great pilot. Like the flight's going down, I want Brad Stevens because he's calm in the cockpit. I mean, could you picture Stan Van Gundy as a pilot? I mean, he would not be Sully.
You wouldn't get takeoff. You'd run right off the runway.
Well, he's kind of a heavy guy too,
Yeah. So, all right.
He looks like Ron Jeremy, the porn star.
He does exactly very much so. So that will do it for our coaching carousel talk. I also think, Sap, that there's a good chance that a surprise candidate emerges, a la Steve Nash last year, which nobody expected. Say, oh, this guy, he used to play.
Yeah. Who would that be? That's an interesting one. That's an interesting point.
I mean, we'll have to see if somebody retires. I mean, could Rondo retire and then become a head coach?
Rondo would be either a great head coach or a total disaster.
I think everybody expects him to be a head coach.
At some point, it's worth trying, right? Because we're talking about a guy who's, I think, got an incredible knowledge of basketball. I don't know how he is as a communicator. That's a big part of this. He does seem like he can be difficult to deal with as a player and as a coach. We saw what he did with Kawhi Leonard after Game 5 of the Dallas series. He's basically calling him out right, in the middle of the game, or late in the game, but right in the middle of the court. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, Chris Paul's
who could come out of nowhere, right? Because
someone who
Steve Nash came out of nowhere.
Like I said, he was working on his golf and tennis game, running his businesses, and seemed to be more interested in soccer than he was in basketball.
Like Jalen Rose, Grant Hill.
It's still Mark Jackson.
Yeah, but he still
who's
wouldn't come
already
out of
coached.
nowhere because he's
Yeah,
coached
it'd be
before.
coming out of the broadcast booth. And look, if you're making what $3 to $5 million a year, whatever they're paying Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy, that's a great gig. Especially with COVID the
work
last year
like
and a half.
30 days a year.
And you don't even have to leave your home.
No, it's
like
awesome.
Aaron Rodgers. It's like Aaron Rodgers hosting Jeopardy. I think he has 46 taping sessions in a year, and it's 10 to 12 million. No wonder he wants the gig. That's a good second job besides being a quarterback. But yeah, a player that maybe retired a few years ago. Paul Pierce. Forget Paul Pierce has got other things going on. I don't think he's going to sit there and concentrate and be a head coach. Not Kevin Garnett. He wants to own a team. But yeah, someone along those lines. I remember when Byron Scott came in as a head coach, and I thought he was pretty good at it. But I'm always really intrigued by the guys who look serious about their craft, right? Like Chauncey Billups and Sam Cassell or Darvin Ham, guys who went into coaching and they understand that they're going to be assistants. They're going to learn from other head coaches. They're going to, get their reps
that's what I'd want to hire. I
accordingly.
think the other thing is bullcrap. Like Steve Nash shouldn't have gotten that job. It's completely ridiculous.
And Stephen A. was right about it. When Stephen A. Smith was like, name another former player who was black that would have got that job. I can't think of any. Steve Nash,
no business getting
player.
that job.
No,
it was silly.
But it had to be. It may have been Kevin Durant, who there was a connection in Golden State, and we know Durant, Kyrie, Harden, whatever. Well, Harden came later, but those guys are pretty much running things. And I keep looking at Steve Nash. He's all like choked up on the sideline with that shirt that he wears. He's starting to look like Richie Aprile from The Sopranos. Like this really intense look. Yeah, I kind of like that look-alike. So hopefully it ends better for Steve Nash than Richie Aprile. When Janice, put a couple of bullets in his head after he was eating
a volatile woman.
Oh, she should be the head of some sort of basketball operation. She'd be making trades all over the place.
Yeah. All right, Sap. Well, we are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We're presented by Full Press Coverage. We will be with you for all the latest going on in the playoffs, and whenever any of these coaching positions are filled, we will have you covered there with our analysis and opinions. And, the NBA is providing us with news every day, so make sure you're checking our Twitters every day for the latest from the show and NBA news at JohnSap25 or at JetStryer. And we will talk to you later. See you, everybody.